The morning briefing at Camp Lejeune had the particular stillness of a hell breath. 43 officers from across 4 branches filled the long conference room, their coffee cups sweating rings onto the polished table, their uniforms pressed into submission. The air conditioning ran too cold, as it always did in rooms where men try to seem important, and the projector threw a pale rectangle of light against the far wall. Sergeant First Class Amara Osei had arrived 11 minutes early, which was her habit. She took a seat near the back left corner, not out of deference, but because she preferred to see the whole room. Old instinct. You learn to read the geography of a space before you need to move through it fast. She set her notebook on the table, uncapped her pen, and waited. She was the only woman in the room. She was also, by a margin that was impossible to ignore, the only black person. Neither fact occupied much of her attention. Both facts occupied the attention of several people around her, which she clocked the way she clocked everything, quietly, completely, without expression. She was 34 years old. Her hair was pulled back beneath her patrol cap. Her jaw was the kind of jaw that looked carved rather than grown. She had the eyes of someone who had spent a great deal of time looking at things very far away. Rear Admiral Thomas Holt arrived 8 minutes late, which was also his habit, because men like him had long ago internalized the lesson that time is a currency and tardiness is a way of spending other people's. He was 61, broad through the shoulders, with silver hair and the particular brand of easy confidence that comes from having been the most decorated person in most rooms for most of 3 decades. His aide, a young lieutenant named Prescott, trailed 2 steps behind him with a tablet and the alert expression of someone who had learned that being in Holt's orbit required constant readiness. Holt moved to the head of the table and set both hands flat on its surface in a way that telegraphed ownership. He scanned the room once, the practiced sweep of a man assessing his audience, and his gaze stopped when it reached Amara. It didn't stop in the way that a gaze stops when it finds something threatening or unfamiliar. It stopped the way a gaze stops when it finds something unexpected and decides, before the brain has fully weighed the implications, to make a joke of it. "Well," Holt said, loud enough for the room. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling in a way that his staff had been told, and had subsequently told others, was charming. "I don't think we've been introduced, and I make it a point to know the staff here." He tilted his head with theatrical curiosity. "What's your rank, soldier?" The question landed in the room with a particular weight. A few officers shifted in their chairs. Prescott looked at his tablet. The man to Amara's left, a Marine colonel named Davenport who had met Amara twice before and respected her considerably, went very still. Amara looked at Holt with the calm of someone who had been shot at. "Sergeant First Class," she said. Her voice was even. "Osei, I'm attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment, currently on loan to the Joint Special Operations Task Force for the duration of this exercise cycle." Holt had not expected her to answer like that. He had expected, on some frequency he would never have articulated aloud, a flutter of nerves, a slight stumble, the particular smallness that his authority usually produced in people who hadn't yet learned to absorb it. What he got instead was a complete sentence, delivered with the economy of someone who said only what needed saying. He opened his mouth to continue, to press something lighter into the moment, a follow-up that would restore the gentle hierarchy of the room, when he saw it. Her left forearm rested on the table at an angle that had pushed her sleeve just slightly up. It was not a dramatic reveal. Nothing about Amara was dramatic. But the tattoo was visible now, just below the crease of her elbow, and it stopped in the way a name on a wall stops you when you recognize it. The tattoo was a rifle, an M24 sniper weapon system, rendered in fine black lines with a precision that spoke of someone who knew exactly what they were depicting, and beneath it, in a typeface that was clean and unadorned, 3 words in Latin: Unus Ictus Unus. One shot, one. Below that, in smaller script, a sequence of numbers and letters that Holt recognized immediately, because he had spent enough time in the world of special operations to understand exactly what those alphanumeric designations meant. The tattoo wasn't decorative. It was a record. It was the kind of thing that people in certain circles wore when they had done something that couldn't be said aloud in mixed company. He froze. Not the theatrical pause of a man playing at being affected. A genuine, involuntary stillness. The kind that happens when the brain receives information that requires it to completely revise a model it had been operating on without examining. Colonel Davenport, who had gone still earlier for different reasons, now watched Holt with the careful attention of a man waiting to see how a situation would resolve itself. The room had changed in some atmospheric way that everyone felt, but no one could have named precisely. Holt straightened. He pulled his hands off the table and clasped them behind his back. Something moved across his face. Not embarrassment, exactly, because men like Holt rarely permitted themselves the full experience of embarrassment. Something more like recalibration. "Sergeant First Class Osei," he said. His voice had dropped the performance. It was a different register now, flatter and more real. "Who was your JTAC commander on the Kandahar rotation in 2019? The room went quieter than it had been, which had not seemed possible. Amara looked at him steadily. "Major Elias Vore," she said. "Sir." Holt absorbed that. Vore was dead, had been dead since 2021, a vehicle accident outside of Djibouti, and the people who had served under him and alongside him were a small, specific group who carried that fact with them the way you carry a stone in your boot, always aware of it, always adjusted around it. "Did you serve on a cost operation?" Holt asked. "I did," Amaris said. "Fire team or Overwatch?" Overwatch. The word landed the way it always landed among people who understood it. Overwatch was not the same as fire team. Overwatch was the patience of hours, sometimes days, the absolute stillness, the mathematics of wind and elevation and heartbeat, the singular, irreversible moment of decision. Overwatch was the loneliest position in a firefight and the most consequential. The people who did it well were a specific kind of person, and you could not pretend to be that kind of person. Either you were or you were not, and the tattoo on Amara's arm and the designations encoded within it said very clearly which category she occupied. Holt pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down. He did not do it with ceremony. He did it like a man who needed a moment to think. "At ease, everyone," he said, though no one was at formal attention. It was a reflex, something to say into the silence. He looked at Amara again, and this time the looking was different. Not the appraising look of a senior officer sizing up someone he expected to be lesser. The look of a man who is attempting to reconcile two versions of a moment. The version he had entered the room with, and the version he was now sitting inside. "I owe you an apology," he said. He did not say it quietly. He said it at the volume of someone who understood that an apology delivered in a whisper is a favor to yourself, not to the person you've wronged. The words went out into the room and stayed there. Amara did not move. She did not accept the apology with the ease of someone who had been waiting for it, nor did she refuse it. She simply received it, the way she received most things, with a steadiness that was not coldness, but was not warmth either. It was neutrality of the deepest kind, the neutrality of someone who has been in enough situations where their survival depended on their ability to not react until they had fully understood what they were reacting to. "I came into this room," Holt continued, "and I made an assumption, several assumptions, and I used rank as a punchline, which is something I would not have done with anyone else in this room." He paused. "That's a problem. It's my problem." Prescott was very still near the wall. Several officers at the table had the look of people who were trying to be invisible. Colonel Davenport had a small, precise expression that was not quite a smile. "Accepted," Amaris said, finally. Just the one word. Not "thank you." Not "it's all right." Accepted. Like a document signed. Like a condition met. Holt nodded once, sharply, and then picked up his reading glasses from his breast pocket and opened the folder in front of him. "Let's get started," he said. The briefing ran 2 hours. It covered coordination protocol for the joint exercise, rules of engagement updates, communication hierarchies, and the always complicated question of how to integrate Ranger and SEAL operational tempos without grinding one against the other. Holt ran it with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 3 decades, cutting off tangents, asking precise questions, moving the room from one agenda item to the next with the momentum of a man who respected time when it was his own. He called on Amara twice. Once to clarify a detail about terrain assessment protocols that fell within her area of expertise. Once to ask her assessment of a proposed sniper support structure for the southern quadrant of the exercise zone. Both times, she answered with the same economy she had brought to everything else. Clear, specific, no wasted syllables. Both times, Holt listened with the full attention of a man who was doing the work of revising his understanding of a person in real time. After the briefing, as the room shuffled into motion and officers gathered their folders and found their phones and began the various negotiations of departure, Holt remained at the head of the table. He was looking at something on Prescott's tablet, but he was not seeing it. Colonel Davenport stopped beside Amara on his way out. "Good brief," he said, which from Davenport was the equivalent of a standing ovation. "Thank you, sir," she said. "How's the 75th treating you these days?" "Well, sir." "Good." He paused, and something in his pause suggested he wanted to say more, wanted to acknowledge what had happened at the start of the meeting in some way that felt adequate to the moment. But there were no adequate words for it that weren't either patronizing or theatrical, and Davenport was smart enough to know it. So he nodded and walked out. Amara was gathering her notebook when Holt appeared at her elbow. He moved quietly for a big man, which was something she noted automatically. "Walk with me a minute," he said. She fell in a step beside him. They went out into the corridor, which smelled of institutional cleaning solution and recirculated air, and Holt walked for a few paces before stopping near a window that looked out over the parade ground. "How many rotations?" he asked. He meant deployments. 7, she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I knew Vore for 11 years, he said. Served with him in Mosul." "I know," Amara said. "He mentioned you." Holt looked at her. "What did he say?" "He said you were one of the hardest people to brief he'd ever worked with, and that was a compliment." Something moved across Holt's face that was almost a smile. "That sounds like him." He looked out the window. "What he never told you was that I once overlooked him for a commendation because I didn't think his operation had been executed cleanly enough. I was wrong. It took me 2 years to admit it." Amara said nothing. She understood that this was not a story told for her benefit. Exactly. It was a story a person tells when they're trying to put a current failure into the context of a longer pattern, trying to explain themselves to themselves with a witness present. "The tattoo," Holt said. "The sequence." I recognized what it was. "Most people don't," she said. "Most people haven't spent enough time in JSOC to know the notation system." He paused. "How many confirmed?" She looked at him steadily. "That's not something I discuss, sir." He accepted that immediately. "No, you're right. I'm sorry." He shook his head slightly. "I keep apologizing to you. You keep doing things that warrant it," she said. And then, before the words could land too hard, "Sir." The corner of his mouth twitched. He turned to look at her directly, and this time the look had none of the entitlement of the beginning of the morning. It was the look of a man seeing someone clearly, perhaps for the first time. "You're going to be a problem for a lot of people," he said. "In the best sense?" "I've been told that before, sir." "I'll bet you have." He straightened and clasped his hands behind his back, the habitual posture of a man who thought on his feet. "I'd like to read your after-action reports from the cost rotation, if they're available and you're comfortable with that. They're classified at a level above yours, sir." He blinked. "Above mine." "Yes, sir." There was a pause, and then Holt let out a short sound that was unmistakably a laugh. Not a polite laugh. A real one. The kind a man produces when he is genuinely caught off guard by something and has enough self-awareness to appreciate it. "Of course they are," he said. They stood for a moment in the corridor, the parade ground visible through the window, the flag at its center moving in the slow pull of a coastal wind. "Sergeant First Class," Holt said finally, "I want to tell you something. Not as an admiral and not as an apology. Just as one person who has spent a significant amount of time in the field talking to another." "Sir," she said, "the way you handled this morning, the way you've handled everything since I walked in that door, is the kind of thing they can't teach. It's not patience and it's not restraint. It's something else. Something that comes from knowing exactly who you are and not needing anyone else to confirm it." He paused. "I've met 3 people in my career with that quality. All 3 of them were exceptional soldiers. All 3 of them were also treated at various points in ways they should not have been treated." He looked at her. "I don't know your full history. I don't need to. I just want you to know that I see it." Amara was quiet for a moment. Outside, 2 privates crossed the parade ground at a jog, their boots precise and synchronized. "With respect, sir," she said, "I don't need you to see it, but I appreciate it." He nodded. One slow nod, the kind that means understood, not the kind that means agreed. "Where are you stationed after this exercise cycle?" he asked. "Fort Bragg," she said. "Then we'll see. If you ever want a JSOC placement, I can make a call." "I'll keep that in mind, sir." He looked at her one more time, and in that look was everything the morning had contained. The joke, the freeze, the apology, the revision, the strange and uncomfortable and necessary education of a man who had believed he was past needing one. And then he turned and walked back down the corridor toward the next thing on his schedule, his aide materializing from somewhere to fall in a step behind him. Amara stood at the window for a moment longer. The flag moved in the coastal wind. The privates had crossed the parade ground and disappeared. The sun was higher now, hitting the concrete at an angle that turned it almost white. She recapped her pen and tucked her notebook under her arm and walked out into the morning. She had a range session at 1400. She didn't like to be late.